Now to Europe, electricity is being restored across Spain and Portugal a day after a massive power cut. It caused disruption to millions of shops, homes and businesses and paralysed transport networks in both countries. The operator of Spain's national grid says that power has now been restored to 90% of the country's mainland, but the effects of the blackout are likely to be felt for days. Well, our correspondent in Spain and Portugal gave us the latest from the ground. Here's Guy Hedgecoe in Madrid.
Well, certainly in central Madrid, it feels as if things are pretty much back to normal. Traffic is flowing again after there's problems with traffic lights yesterday. However, there are some exceptions. Schools are not open as normal today in many areas of the country. And another big exception is rail travel. There's still quite severe disruption in many areas of the country, particularly up in the region of Catalonia. And some other areas, and many rail passengers did spend the night out in stations last night. So things are still returning to normal. There's a feeling that we're not quite back to 100%, but the authorities are telling us that in the coming hours, they're hoping that we will be back up to 100% of energy supply, and we'll be back to, relatively speaking, back to normal.
Guy there in Madrid. Alison, you're in Lisbon. We understand that, as Guy was saying, schools not reopening fully across Spain, but the situation is slightly different in Portugal. What's the scenario there like?
Well, right now I'm actually in the north of Portugal. The lights came on a little bit earlier than in Lisbon last night, but now there are perhaps a couple of 100,000 people only without power. The government says that they do hope that that will all be resolved in the coming hours. And as you can see behind me, traffic is certainly flowing. Things pretty much back to normal. We had some difficulty with the Lisbon metro system. For example, this morning it opened rather later than usual. Most schools should actually be open and functioning today. Certainly the government said that it expected that. So the expectation is that things will be pretty much back to normal today throughout the day.
OK, and the overwhelming question, Guy, is why? What was behind this huge power outage? I know that Spain's increasing reliance on solar and wind was said to have exacerbated the power cuts. What kind of commentary has there been there in Spain?
Well, yes, I mean, that's one of the things that people are talking about at the moment. And I think, understandably, there's going to be a lot of focus on how Spain generates its electricity, where it comes from. We do know that Spain and Portugal were cut off from the main European grid yesterday, but we don't know why this happened. Inevitably, I think there's a lot of talk about cyber attacks, possibly, but the government's been quite adamant that we shouldn't jump to conclusions. It's saying that it's not ruling out any possibilities. There was one senior politician in the south of the country, Juanma Moreno, yesterday, who seemed to be pointing the finger very firmly at a cyber attack. But the government has insisted that we don't know that at the moment. That's just one hypothesis. And it's saying we have to be patient and wait for more information before we know exactly what happened.
Yeah, and Alison, Portugal's leader, Prime Minister Luis Montenegro, was very quick yesterday to say that this wasn't a cyber attack.
Well, he said certainly there's nothing that could point to that. And obviously, there were people who came out and said this looks as though it's a cyber attack. But certainly the government said there's no evidence pointing to that at all. But from the point of view of Portugal, obviously, they are looking to Spain now to see if they can work out what the causes are. When Portugal came back up again, it was very much a local affair with two major power stations getting the system back and running with no help from Spain. So they're back to the old days when the two systems were running separately, because normally they are very much interconnected, and that's why Portugal was affected with this power outage.
And Guy, you've talked about the disruption across the rail networks, across the Madrid metro, but tennis also being impacted. The Madrid Open, it was the games were cancelled yesterday. What's the situation like today? Do we know?
Well, that's right. It was, and this is a major sporting event, not just for Madrid, but for Spain. The latest, I'm told, is that I believe that play is expected to resume today, but we're awaiting further details about that. But I think it shows how far this outage reached not just into things like transport and traffic and so on, but into many other areas of life, and how it even affected sport yesterday.
Yeah, indeed. And Alison, just a final word from you then. Just as slowly those power supplies are re-energised and people are getting back to normal, I wonder, was there a sense of exasperation across the public in Portugal, or was it down to business as usual, albeit without essential mobile phones?
Well, there was some degree of panic yesterday. A lot of people rushing to what shops were open to buy essentials. A lot of people buying water, toilet paper. This is something we saw in lockdown during the pandemic. Perhaps a little bit of concern that the government didn't come out a little earlier and make clear that it was on the case, as it were. But in fact, for much of the day yesterday, it wasn't just the internet. In fact, it wasn't possible to even make mobile phone calls. It was only people who had car radios or battery-powered radios that actually could work out what was going on.
Our thanks to Alison Roberts there in Lisbon, Guy Hedgecoe in Madrid.